Greetings and welcome to Mount Olympus. I am Hercules Invictus, and today on Voice of Olympus, I'm proud to bring you Living Theurgy, a years-long conversation where we discuss many things and learn from each other. And we have today my favorite theurgists, Brandy Williams, Clio Ajana, Tony Mierzwicki, and Apollonius. Greetings, fellow theurgists. Now, next month is the month before our book comes out, so we will dedicate the next show, as Brandy suggested, to the book. But today I wanted to ask you all what your thoughts are about using planets and planetary magic. I'm not very big on the planets, but I do use them. And just like my theurgy is kind of unorthodox, my planetary work is unorthodox too. I use the days of the week, and then each day of the week has a planet and a Greek god or goddess associated with it. So I just work with them on that level. So Sunday, for instance, is Hercules because of his labors through the zodiac. That's the path of the solar avatar. But it doesn't matter if you're not comfortable with Hercules. You could use Apollo, you could use Helios, you could use whatever solar avatar you feel comfortable with. Then Monday, the day of the moon, is Athena. In some Etruscan lore, Athena and Hercules are man and wife, and Ares is their child, and Hercules is the son of Hera and Zeus. So there's no animosity there. So I prefer those myths. So Tuesday is Ares and Mars. Wednesday is Mercury or Hermes. Thursday is Zeus. Friday is Aphrodite or Venus, and Saturday is Saturn's day or Cronus's day. So each deity represents certain things. And the system is a little bit more complicated than that because there's secondary planets, there are constellations, there's planets that never existed, except in the imagination of metaphysicians or even scientists. So all that plays a part in the soup that is my planetary practice. But basically it boils down to those planets, those energies, those days. So who would like to start in sharing their wisdom about the planets? No one.
I elect Tony or Clio.
I'm happy to
Okay.
start because I use planetary hours. So I'll just pick up where you left off.
Okay.
How about that? So you go by the day, and so in working with planets, the ones for each day, I actually use for ritual work, group ritual work, personal ritual work. I look to see where things are for the actual planetary hours. So, for example, we're currently switching from Mars, interesting, into the sun. So it'll be a good time. Um, and I use those pretty much for when I'm going through and looking to see what things are. Sometimes I think in spell work especially, it's a little tricky because I add to the planetary hours. I use the planets with moon cycle waxing and waning. So with some of my students, the big issue is, well, you're always looking for love or looking for the job promotion or looking for something. And I always like to say, well, when would be the best time if you're going to do spell work for that? Even something simple. And it's good practice. Sometimes I think people learn it when they're entering the craft and then they're not necessarily using it as much. They just are aware of what's happening. So that's how I use it. So I take not just the days of the week, but I also look at what the actual planetary hours are. And usually with public rituals, ours are always on Saturday, for example. So a lot of times, especially if it's the banishing part of the lunar cycle, the more powerful stuff gets done on those Saturdays. Not always, but sometimes. And when teaching, I try to emphasize that when students are first getting started and they're trying to figure their way with rituals, circles, casting circles, how they're doing it, when they're connecting with the gods and they're speaking with the gods, kind of note when they're doing it, what the planetary hour is, what the day is. So for example, this is a Friday, like you mentioned, Aphrodite or Venus. And maybe if you're wanting a stronger connection, this might be a great time to actually, well, not this particular hour, but this might be a great time to actually sit and have a ritual where you're working specifically on your relationship and or energies with Venus, if that's been an issue for you, for example. Um, Probably for a long time I had issues with Saturn, and then I became friends with the restriction, since Saturn governs restriction. It's like, okay, what are we doing with this? And it's now become, I won't say my favorite, but one of my favorites. Um, and in turn, I also look at, besides planetary hours, I look at the lunar cycles for those who were not keeping track. And don't worry, you might have heard about it buried beneath all the news, that we have what I thought was a fascinating month. We are now 5 months and counting from the big joining astrologically of Saturn and Neptune, starting 0 degree Aries. That'll be lovely. And that's in February. But right now we've got Virgo, 23 degrees. It was actually, sorry, 23rd of August. It was 0 degrees Virgo, which I had never seen before. And so, yes, I was a geek. I was up at like 2 o'clock in the morning, exactly when it was 0 degrees, to make sure I had all my plans in place. And the energy of that weekend in August, I don't know if anybody remembers that. It was very much, okay, we're going to get this done. Lots of good beginning stuff. And I hadn't thought about it, but tomorrow, well, today's Friday. 2 days from now, it'll be in the anaretic degree, the 29th degree of any particular planetary position. It's rather powerful. It either is you are figuring out stuff, and I'm going, okay, yeah, most people don't talk about the anaretic degree, but I think it's interesting that we have the same dark moon and dark moon within the same period. So twice within that 29, 30-day period, we have these, and it's on top of a Sabbath. So for me personally, it's been a time where I've been dealing with order and new starts at the end of August, and then kind of the supersonic push through start on Sunday, because Sunday is also the partial solar eclipse. So it's kind of like you get this boost in your energies. And I was at a Mabon ritual today, and this weekend is all about the Sabbath. And so I figure if you got to get yourself balanced and equilibrium, which is what the Sabbath's about, planetary wise, it really helps that there's this boost this weekend. So for those who are looking at this and going, huh, is it still time? Yes, you can take advantage of it. You got time to do it. What else did you want to know about the eclipses?
Well, whatever you care to share. You've opened many, many, many doors. So we
Well,
have
I mean, I guess
material now.
one more that I would like to open, because at the time I was usually studying, I didn't think about much about it, but we don't, in talking with planets, I think eclipses do have a role. Some people are like, if they're really into astrology, they love eclipses or they don't like eclipses. And probably one of the best analogies I had heard of was you're going along, riding your horse or walking, whatever it is, and all of a sudden, boom, here comes this hedge. You leap up and over the hedge, or you end up in a ditch. One of the two. So either, but it's sudden out of the blue. And for eclipse timing, the effects of the eclipses. And that is something I always find very interesting to see how that manages. So I'm not an expert in it, except that I find that the pairing of the eclipses, right now, this pair is Pisces and Virgo. So if you're looking at the full moon weekend, which was 2 weekends ago, it was Pisces, which to me was very interesting. Saturn had just gone retrograde back into Pisces again for the last time, probably in many of our lifetimes, because it won't be around for another 29 or so years. And I thought, wow, this is great. So for those folks out there who are going through their second Saturn return, and maybe there's a few blessed ones who are going through their third. If you're going through your second one, it's like, wow, you have one more chance to clean up all the spiritual stuff before we then zip off into Aries. And I just find this to be a fascinating period. Full disclosure, I'm finishing up my second Saturn return, and it's been an amazing 2.5 years. So the fact that it's it's culminating in the start of it with the eclipse season. I don't see it as an accident. I do see it as a happy coincidence putting everything together. So, but yes, eclipses, I like the having the total lunar eclipse at the full moon. So I felt like, okay, it was good. And now the partial solar eclipse for the second dark moon makes me, check my list and make sure I've got everything in place that I want to go zoom for it. And we won't get this again for another 6 months. So that's my take on planets, eclipses, and a few other things.
Well, thank you very much. Like I said, you've opened very many doors that now we can play with. So thank you. I'm grateful for that. And you also reminded me of things I've tried, but I've kind of put on the shelf. Now I want to play with them again. So thank you very much, Clio.
You're welcome.
Tony, are you ready?
Yes. So I really enjoyed what Clio had to say. I do planetary workings every day. Over the last few months, I've started bringing back some Golden Dawn elements. So I'll start off with the Lesser Banished Ritual, the pentagram, Lesser Banished Ritual, the hexagram, and then I do the invoking hexagram ritual for the day, and then I go into the PGM stuff, which I normally use. It's just enhancing my practices. One thing I wanted to briefly discuss was I've been starting to look into sidereal astrology as opposed to tropical astrology, because when astrology was first developed, you had the Babylonians looking at the stars, the planets, and then correlating what they could see up in the heavens with what was happening around them. And they did that over many, many generations. But when you go into tropical astrology, what you get in horoscopes doesn't reflect what you see in the sky, because it's a seasonal thing. And I was actually thinking about how that relates to something that Abramelin said. Clio was talking about planetary hours, and as we know, there are 3 window periods every day for working. So if, say, for instance, today is the day of Aphrodite or Venus. So if you wanted to work with her, her hours are the first planetary hour after sunrise, the 8th hour after sunrise, and the 3rd hour after sunset. One thing that Abramelin pointed out is that for some of those times, Venus will not be visible. So he recommended that rather than working with planetary hours, you should work with the planet when it is visible. From memory, his recommendation was to work with the planet when the planet was at its peak, at its zenith. But another thing you could do is look at which of those 3 planetary hours of the day correspond to when the planet is visible. So that way, you know that you definitely have that influence coming in. The problem that Abramelin had was, say, you might be wanting to work with Venus or Aphrodite, but she could be under the Earth. So his question was, how can you be working with her planetary influence if she's under the Earth? So I'm just basically teasing out stuff that Clio brought up. So opening up for discussion.
Thank you for opening that up to discussion. And again, certain things I tried and abandoned or tried and put on the shelf for now. Now I'm excited about revisiting them and trying things out. Thank you, Tony. Apollonius, would you like to continue the conversation?
Well, I can do. I don't know how much I can contribute to this. I do not work with the planets very much, and as I listened to Cleo and Tony, I was thinking, well, I really don't work with astrology very much. It's not been a divination system that, or really a way of understanding the universe that I've used a whole great deal. I have done some astrological magic over the years, mostly using either Ptolemaic or early modern astrology. Um, but not too often. And so, and in terms of kind of religious practice, a lot of that has been, and theurgy, I would say too, a lot of that has been based more in, for me, in kind of the, I would say that, you know, the earlier sort of non-magical kind of ritual practices, which didn't use astrology so much. And even in Neoplatonic theurgy, although there's definitely an important astrological element to it, um, I wouldn't say it's central, you know? And so I've tended to understand the planetary gods or the celestial gods as kind of really the way I think the Neoplatonists understand it, certainly Plato, who I've written about recently, um, you know, that they're the gods that are in between the super celestial gods who are outside of space and time, and they're the ones we normally think of, Athena and Zeus and Hermes and Aphrodite and Apollo and all of the sort of high gods, we might say. Um, and the celestial gods are intermediate. They're between they're because they're eternal, but yet they're in time. So they're sort of the rank between the super celestial gods and the daimons. And that's kind of the way I conceptualize with them now. So I view them more as intermediaries that I can work with to, if you like, intervene uh, between me and the high gods, who my theurgical practice lately is more focused on now. And even in terms of magic, I would say it's more focused on interacting with the super celestial gods. So, um, although you know, again, I've done some astrological magic, and I've from time to time I've timed things with the planetary days and hours, but that's not something I usually um, pay a lot of attention to. I do think about the lunar cycle when I'm doing things. I should say also something that, because I've been working in this theological and religious system of Plethon's, um, that of course he has a completely different calendar, and he doesn't have a 7-day week at all. He's got a very celestial calendar organized around the cycles of the sun and the moon in a sort of rationalized uh, lunar solar calendar, um, because he says, well, they're gods. You know, the moon and the sun are gods. They're celestial gods. So we should honor them in the calendar. But as a result, there's not exactly a 7-day week, or at least there's not a 7-day cycle. I mean, it's organized. The lunar month is organized into um, you know, 29 or 30 days, uh, but and within that there are 7-day units. Um, but you know, you don't get this sort of repeating cycle that we do with the Gregorian calendar. And so that raises the question for me, you know, for working with the planetary days, is, well, you know, I'm kind of sorry that Jean-Louis is not here this week, because I know, for instance, in Aurum Solis, I believe they use the 7-day week, but it's not synchronized with the Gregorian calendar. And so I don't recall exactly how it works, whether it begins on a new moon, or exactly how it works, or whether it's the Julian calendar. But anyway, it's like he says very explicitly in his pagan almanac that, you know, the usual 7-day week that we use in the West is wrong. Is basically the way he puts it. It's wrong, and so he has a different alignment. Now, in one sense, I don't think that matters too much, because I think it's all symbolic, you know, and so much now fun day is the moon's day. If you work with this stuff at all, there's that association is just very strong, and Sunday is the sun's day, and so on. So, on one sense, the historical problem is maybe not so important, um, but it is kind of an issue. And of course, the other issue is how do you do your planetary hours too? The Egyptian way was to divide between sunrise and sunset into equal partitions, as opposed to going by the clock, um, which I don't know what you all do, but I think that does make more sense to me. So, I don't really typically work with the planetary days or the planetary hours. If I'm working with the planets as gods, I'm viewing them as celestial gods. And from that standpoint, too, I view them as metaphysical principles. So, uh, to my mind, there's seven of them, and those other planetary objects that we've discovered since then, well, that's sort of irrelevant to me. So I don't pay any attention to Neptune or Uranus or Pluto, or to the asteroids or the other sorts of things that are not a part of traditional astrology. Because again, I don't think it has anything much to do with the actual physical planets. I think these are metaphysical principles that have to do with, the heavens as an eternal realm, sort of between us and the high gods. So I don't know. That's kind of a rambling thing, but it's because I really, it's not a major part of my sort of ordinary practice. Um, so I can't say too much specifically about that. I'm fascinated by some of the stuff that Clio said, um, and that I was also unaware of. So that was very informative.
Thank you very much, Apollonius. And the symbolism is I find the symbolism interesting, and sometimes I'll use things in my symbolism, sometimes I won't. But I've been experimenting with the cosmic rays that the Theosophists and the New Agers have, and those are tied with the planets also. But depending on which particular group's beliefs you happen to adopt or play with, the color associations are different. And some of them that are more historical, you could tell what happens. Like in a lot of these schemes, the sun the color is blue. And for Mercury, the color is gold because of the Greco-Roman associations. But it also is when the ancients looked at the sky before they understood heliocentrism, the blue was the highest. It was the firmament.
Mm.
So that's why blue is the highest and it comes to first. So even though the sun is yellow, it comes below the blue in their way of looking at the universe. And the spiritual sun, which Hermes helped us connect with, is gold for that reason, even though he's not the central part of the sky. So a lot of them, figuring out how they came to the conclusion that they came to, teaches a lot of insight. But thank you very much. That was I want to go further into Platon's writings. I bought your books, but I've been very limited on the amount of time I've had to read them. So now I'm going to forge ahead and understand the celestial and super celestial gods. Thank you.
Could I comment on Apollonius's
Sure.
talk? One thing that I really, really agree with is that he sticks to the celestial bodies known to the ancients. The thing is that the ancients noticed correlations between the planets and various gods, but everything that was discovered after the ancients, so we're talking about Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, they were named by astronomers. So
Right.
I don't see any sort of connection at all between those celestial bodies and the gods they're named after, because they weren't named by initiates.
They're interested. The Greek associations, everyone knew they came from Babylon and that the archangels came from these lists.
Mm-hmm.
But the actual associations of the planets with gods happened during the time of Plato, post-Plato, in the Neoplatonic schools. I don't remember the names of the books, but I remember reading sections of arguments as to which planets should be assigned to which deity, or which deity should be assigned to which planet. And one thing I recall very clearly was that Tuesday, a lot of people felt that it should be Hercules and not Aries, because Hercules had a more heroic reputation among the Greeks, whereas Ares had it with the Romans, where he was more heroic with the Romans. And there was actually argument about that went back and forth, championing each thing. So, yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Brandy?
There are weeks that, or months that this gathering is like Toastmasters for theurgists. So I'm like, okay, I got today planets. I don't have anything prepared, but I was thinking about stuff as people were talking. So I have a couple of things. One thing immediately is that we've talked before. Tony and I tune into the planets by the days of the week, and we have different associations with the color of Friday. So I'm wearing my green shirt. Tony's wearing his blue shirt. Apollonius has come in on the Tony side. And I noticed that. Um, yeah, Clio, you're sort of blue, I think.
And I'm wearing a black t-shirt, so Nichta
Yeah,
is
black works everywhere. One thing
I would normally wear pink underneath, but I actually was I was doing my I was working with a group today, and so for that I go to the facility where I need to dress down and be safe. So I actually have black underneath this instead of pink or green, because I was trying to stay warm. We've had rain, and
Oh
and
no.
so, yeah, we've had rain. It's like out of nowhere, and it's like, okay. And you know what it's like to have be at an outdoor ritual where it's not rainy, it's not quite sprinkly, but you're out there and the wind is blowing. Good thing we had a fire.
I live in the Northwest. I really know that.
So
That's where we live.
but yeah, so but if I had my druthers today, I'd be wearing
Pink.
pink.
Well, as I was listening to folks, I was thinking, how do I relate to the planets? And of course, I tune into them for the days of the week. But I think I relate to a set. So not an individual planet, but I think of them as being a set, and the set that was designated by the ancients. And I also there so we talk about the correspondences, colors, and synthema, so objects that are correspond with the planets, and then also sort of the energy, and the energy gets attached to deity, or deities get attached to that energy, and that's one way we access it. But I kind of think of them as an energy, and we were talking about like time. You can tune into the cycle as you move through the week, depending on the system you're using, right? Or an astrological time. But there are other ways to tune into the energy of the planets also. I have a friend who's teaching, and she's teaching the planetary energies. So it's like the planet of the month, and she and her students notice that as they're tuning into that energy, it reflects in their life. So what's going on in their life? We do Mars, and then conflicts kind of come to the fore, and they get a chance to get resolved. And with Venus, we have a chance to tune into beauty and creating things in craft. So I think that's kind of an interesting thing, and it's kind of like you can bring the planets into your life in any way and move into their sphere, and then you're in that sphere, and then navigating what that energy means. And I think that's a kind of interesting way to approach it. But I think it's really important to make sure to do all of the set. You can get stuck. You don't want to get stuck in Mars. You want to balance that. Oh, the other way to access the planetary energies is if you have any Kabbalistic system. Kabbalah maps out onto the planets, and there are all kinds of cycles that you can go through. Just move like from Earth to Moon to Mercury to Venus to Sun. That set of energies gives you a way to sort of pattern it. I don't think that there's a monthly correspondence. They're astrological signs that correspond to the months. Again, depending on the system that you use. Manilius is what I use. And I suppose you could take the ruling planet of the sign and tune it to it that way. If I'm doing months, so I tend to do the astrological signs known to the West, right? But that's my insight for the day. You can move into the sphere of the planet, however you get it. Then you're working with that energy, and be careful what you teach, because it can take you down that path.
Yes, I can. Thank you, Brandy. And I've also found too that regardless of the system that I wind up sticking with for a while, there are other ways of accessing. What I use the days for is because it's a handy unit of time for me. And it reminds me to look at my life in the various spheres that the planets represent. So on Sunday, for instance, I think about my interaction with the outer world and outer world type issues and so forth. When I think of the moon, it's the inner world. So my dreams, my meditations, my visions, and I look at those and work on those. On Mars's day, I look at the challenges in my life and how am I meeting the challenges that life is throwing my way, or my psychology is throwing my way, or whatever. Then communication. How am I communicating? Am I communicating effectively? Am I heard? Am I listening, and so forth? With Zeus, it's the vision. What is my vision? And how am I doing with taking my most benevolent and grandest vision and making it into a reality? Friday with love, in the spheres of love in my life. How am I doing there? What are the stories that I'm living out, and how can I live out better stories? And then with Saturn, and Saturn's one of my favorites now too, because I could schedule things like crazy now. I could pattern my time and channel my energies so much better now that I'm attuned with Saturn. And I'm in the winter of my years, which is his domain. So that's another unit of life to go through, and I'm learning very many things from him. So thank you very much.
I had something else I wanted to add, if you
Sure.
guys are open to it. I realized right after thank you for mentioning stuff, Tony and Apollonius. And then I was like, oh, I overlooked a really obvious one. Does anyone else here work with planetary spirits? The Olympus
Yes.
planetary spirits. Okay. And there's like an obvious mention for those. And it's something that I think you've said several times now, Hercules. I used to do this and then I stopped. So I'm thinking of, other stuff and think, yeah. And that is something that I've brought back up in my practice, but focusing instead of all at once, even though Brandy, I agree, I consider them to be a set, but actually taking time to go through each one, which takes a very long time if you actually are doing it. And I've come to the conclusion that we have time. We only think we don't have time. That's that Saturnian influence, that we think we don't have time, but we have time for what we're going to get through. And so yes, so the planetary spirits and those things, I think, again, and I thought it was interesting, Tony, you had said something about because there weren't necessarily initiates, and we don't know enough about the astronomers who actually named the planets to know if they had any correlation. Like you, I would think they wouldn't. They just were like doing their job as scientists. Um, do you think, is it possible that some of them had a little help from people perhaps who were initiates when they considered naming, or if they just said, well, we got 7 planets, 7 bodies already named, so we might as well just keep going instead of just starting with new names?
I actually think very
Oh,
possible could have channeled something. Like, remember the benzene molecule? Before that was actually identified, there was a guy who was trying to work out the structure of benzene, and he had a dream of Ouroboros serpents, serpents with their tails in their mouths, and he realized it had to be a circular shape. So that's how he came up with the idea of the benzene molecule. So that was something that came to him in his dreams. Edison would also channel stuff in his dreams. Apparently, he had this technique where he would have a ball between his knees and he'd have the ball above a bucket. So he would try to go into the hypnagogic state, the theta state, and then as soon as he started to fall asleep, the ball would hit the bucket, wake him up, and then he'd go back into that state. So by extending out the amount of time that he was in that state, he was actually able to channel messages. So it is possible that the guys who named the planets had channeled stuff. I mean, there are thousands of astrologers out in the world who believe in the validity of those planets. So it is possible that something that important may have been given the right name. I'm just speculating.
According to theosophical lore, and this is Blavatsky theosophy, because now there's a neo-theosophy, and in antiquity there was the original theosophy, and then there was the Christian theosophy, and they believed that during the Hellenistic era, because there was not communication between all the lands around the Mediterranean Sea, that initiates were conversing more readily and people were more in contact and exchanging ideas. So they decided to standardize the esoteric information and to allow the people the exoteric or the mythical holiday type of information, which was a corrupted form of the actual information they had, and then to save the standardized form for the actual initiates. And they believed that this information should be the same from place to place. And there was some standardization, and they call that Theosophia, the divine wisdom. So that's what Blavatsky and company taught us about that.
I find it interesting that the urge to standardize any particular set of rules or understanding or principles about a field comes along right when it would be better not to standardize it, because I think you kind of stop or halt any future evolutionary ideas, exposure, because it's all one thing. And so when you mention that, I kind of think, I wonder if that was possibly the intent of standardization, so that everyone is allegedly thinking going the same way, even though there might be others who might have a different idea, but it would be less readily accepted because everything is standardized.
That makes as much sense as anything else we've brought up. So it's a great
Okay.
speculation. It's wonderful to think about. Would anybody else like to say anything about the topic before we move on? I want to find out what everybody's doing and how people can contact them next.
Yeah, just one brief thing. I did want to follow up on what you said and what Brandy said, and Tony and Clio too, actually. But I thought it was worth calling out again how important it is to go through the whole set, as Brandy called it, the whole cycle, whether it's all the planets, whatever you consider all the planets to be, or it's all of the signs of the zodiac, or whatever, or the 12 Olympians, and so forth, because this, I think, is one of the real strengths of a polytheistic worldview, is it does get that balance. It assures that all of the gods, all of the spirits get their due, and we don't ignore, repress, neglect any of them. And I think that's really important. So yeah, I would, from that standpoint, it really struck me what you were saying, that this is really, I think, in a sense, the most important thing. How exactly it's aligned with, what's actually going on in the heavens. Well, that's important, but I think the most important thing is to go all the way around each time, or whatever the path is, but to make sure you visit all of the different entities or spirits, or powers or energies within that particular system. So that's all I wanted to say. Is
I agree with you. That's a good observation. And my planetary experiences are framed very much by the UFO phenomenon and the cosmic spiritualities that we have today, as well as in antiquity. And there, the planetary spirits take the shape of UFO aliens that have been contacting different groups of contactees and giving messages which are channeled and 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 again, it's a zoo of beliefs but there's a lot of consistency in them. And that's part of the challenge, wending your way through that labyrinth of beliefs. But yeah, you have to look at everything. I have a show that, like our show, it's been going on just as long, called the UFO Entity Enigma. And every month we look at a different alien bunch of spirits that are communicating with people. And we're sharing what our own researchers are telling us about that. And then I have another show, which is a forum of people who believe in cosmic spiritualities and have dedicated their life to them. And then we discuss basic questions like, why are we here? You know, what do the space aliens want us to do? Why do they want us to do this? You know, how can we work together to make this a better world? And so it, it, it is very important to see the whole thing as a whole, because otherwise it's very misleading, because there are things that are unifying about these different messages that you won't see unless you've been to each of these places. And the effect that they have is not so much on the people who belong to these organizations or who channel the messages, but it takes 20, 30, 40 years, which isn't a long period of time, before these ideas through entertainment and other things become common ideas in our culture. So you can't see that unless you like wander around enough of it and then look at what is actually happening since we started getting these messages. And there seemed to be some way of developing us to look at things in a certain way over a period of time, and to have ideas that sound crazy become acceptable and to reshape our reality. So that's my speculation on it. But thank you, John.
Did you, I'll ask you afterwards. I was thinking that second grouping you mentioned sounded rather fascinating, so I'm interested.
Oh, okay. How can people find you and follow your many teachings and your adventures and your publications and all the wonderful things that you're doing? This is a great time, I believe, for theurgists to be alive and on this planet. Because even though these are very challenging and threatening times, like they were in antiquity, the fact that we can get together once a month and do this and still have connections with one another in between and look at each other's work and benefit from each other. I mean, that's a boon that throughout most of our history, only the gods could grant. So I'm very grateful for this. And we'll start with Apollonius. Apollonius, you're doing some really exciting classes with cool titles, and I guess we'll start with you.
Yeah, so I have been doing some of those classes. I'm gonna I think give it a little bit of a break now for a bit, but yeah, a lot of the stuff that mostly drawn out of some of the books I've published recently. Um, so I'm going to be teaching a course on George Gemistos Plethon's Renaissance or early Renaissance neo-pagan religion next tomorrow. I'm going to be doing it.
Awesome.
So people can follow me on Facebook. I'm on as John Opsopaeus on Facebook. And I have a website, opsopaeus.com, opsopaus.com, where there's information about my books and some news about if I'm giving talks or workshops or stuff like that. And people can get in touch with me either through Facebook or there's an email link on opsopaeus.com. Also have some stuff on wisdomofhypatia.com, although I haven't actually updated that very, very recently. So that's probably the best way to get a hold of me.
I've shared links when I see your stuff up, and to your publishing house. Anything happening with your publishing?
Not immediately. No, not immediately. Yeah, I'm just trying to think. What was the last thing I did was the Orphic Holodemiurgia.
Oh, awesome.
So it's a rather lengthy ritual in some sense similar to the Star Sapphire ritual, and but it's I've got the ritual. It's actually I worked it out decades ago and just finally published it, but it's got the ritual itself, and then there's a whole. It's the first half of the book is the ritual itself, and the second half is the ritual repeated with all sorts of annotation to tell you where the stuff came from, and to really fill in the background for it. So it's kind of a sort of a I think of it as an initiation, but also an introduction to all of this stuff
I'm
based in
interested.
Orphism, and Pythagoreanism.
I'm interested in that the Demiurgy, especially in the Gnostic systems, which I've begun to look at as a color palette with each different school representing like a different shade, so that each of them are, what if the Demiurgy were evil? No, what if the Demiurgy were good? What if they were indifferent but teaching us? So I think that's all. But thank you very much, and I definitely want to look into it. I'm going clockwise according to what's on my screen. Tony.
I gave 5 workshops at Sacred Harvest Festival in early August. I did one
Awesome.
talk on animism, one on ancestor reverence, one on Hermeticism, one on Greek religion, focusing on nature deities, and one they wanted me to talk about Great Egyptian magic. So I did an angelic invocation. I have a workshop coming up for an online conference called Spectral Evidence. That's going to be between October 3rd and 5th. I'll be talking about the Daemon of the Dead. But then I'm not sure if it's this Sunday or the following Sunday. There's a small goddess type gathering ritual in Long Beach at one of the Fellowship of Isis locations, and they want me to work with Athena. So people be working with various goddesses, and I just thought Athena would be very, very appropriate. So I have a blog on Patheos called Holistic Spirituality. I have been a bit slack. I haven't really been adding to it. I've got to get back into that. Probably the best way to contact me is through Facebook.
Thank you very much, Tony. And you're out there. You're like the Saint Paul of theurgy.
I wish. I think Apollonius is closer to the mark there.
Oh, Apollonius is an ancient come to life in our midst. Thank you very much. Clio, what's new and exciting and worth exploring?
Well, let's see. I did my presentations at Mystic South, but that was a couple of months ago. Besides our book, which is coming out, I still do my yes, in 2 months. Yay. Got to plug the book always. And I have monthly, I write for the Wild Hunt under Clio Ajana. You can find me there. There's a lovely little link. You can send an email, and that does come to me directly. You can also, on Facebook, I'm under Clio Ajana, CLIOAJANA, and you can PM me or direct message, however you look at it. I'm perfectly happy, and I do respond to people. That's probably those 2 ways are the fastest ways to get a hold of me. And if you're talking about in person, I know it's a long ways off, but generally I go to Paganicon, and I think I'm going to Sacred Space Between the Worlds. Paganicon's in March, Sacred Space Between the Worlds is in February.
Awesome, incredible, and thank you for opening doors today, as you always do, to a lot of facets of the topic. And I repeated it to Apollonius before. I'll repeat it to everybody now that everybody's here. I look around, and if I see your stuff, any of your stuff, I try to share it, but I'm not always able to spot everything. So you have permission to post things on my page. Even though I lost a big chunk of my audience when Facebook knocked me out for all, I still have like 5,000 people all told. So if you'd like to promote what you're doing, please feel free to place it on my site. And last but not least, Brandy Williams, one of my muses.
Well, I was thinking that Clio is our Hypatia, right? And I've always identified with Sosapatra, so there it is.
Okay.
Brandy, so I'm actually in the process of creating like the 2026 things I'm going to be doing, because you have to start planning now if you're going to Paganicon proposals close on September 30th. So we got to get our proposals in. So I've registered. We'll see if they accept any of my proposals. BrandyWilliamsAuthor.com, and I'm in the process of refreshing my whole author platform. I do that with every new book release, and this isn't like, this is like the next book that I'm involved in, so I'm refreshing the platform for that. So BrandyWilliamsAuthor.com, Brandy Williams Author on Instagram, Brandy Williams Author on Facebook, and then I also have a Pathos blog, Star and Snake, and I actually posted recently, Witchcraft is the flower of the Western magical tradition. So I talked about being a witch and a magician, and where witchcraft came from, and I see it as coming from the Western magical tradition. So it's a point of view. And it let me talk about the history of witchcraft, which is one of my great loves.
Thank you so very much. And with your publishing house, you said you're refreshing it. Is there anything new available on your publishing site?
No, so an author platform, it's a technical term. It means everything that you do, right? So it includes your webpage, your Instagram, your Facebook. I'm YouTube, right? I'm not on TikTok yet, but maybe I'm hiring people to do all this stuff, and maybe the young hip people will get me onto TikTok. But no, I haven't published anything recently for Nemasini Press.
Your videos are popping up in my feed increasingly. You're writing in the parks.
Oh, really? Huh.
Yeah, that's popping up almost every day.
Well, I will probably be making new content as we get into promoting the book. I'll be putting up new videos, so you can go find Brandy Williams Author on YouTube also.
Thank you very much, Brandy. And I've been thinking about doing a new show called THEURGY Beyond the Mediterranean Sea, or Beyond the Middle Sea. And since now theurgy is better known as a term, and people who have nothing to do with classical traditions are doing theurgy, I figured let's explore these other theurgies, because one of our stated purposes was to make theurgy more universal. And I'm sure we didn't do it on our own, but we certainly contributed a little bit to that new understanding and reality. So if anybody here would like to get involved with that, you are more than welcome to. And we have another minute. Clio, did you have a question to ask? You said you had something you were interested in.
You had mentioned it earlier, and you had said you had two. One was the aliens, and the other one was what the aliens want us to do.
Yes.
Okay, so the one with what are the aliens? It sounds lovely, but the one about things happening, and I don't know if I'm getting it right. And for example, what do the aliens want us to do? And looking at, and that sounds like a fascinating exploration. I didn't know when that happened, so that was what I was.
It happens irregularly. Right now I'm restructuring some things, so I'm going to be putting a lot more attention to the alien stuff, because the ancients did all this stuff. Everyone thinks it's new age or brand new, or that it happened after the 1947 sightings of UFOs. No, this is the ancients were saying all this stuff, from antiquity. So it's like to show that this is part of a living tradition, that's part of the human heritage. And it went through many different cultures, and right now it's appearing through many different guises. So if you're a Christian, you could talk to Jesus, you could talk to Kuan Yin, you could talk to Athena, you could talk to Hercules, to Zeus, they're all in this like neo-theosophical thing. And a lot of what we experienced in the New Age came from this type of template that became popularized with the Theosophy and the Rosicrucians and all these other mail order groups that existed. It changed the way the world looks at itself and interprets the sacred part of the universe. So I find that a fascinating study.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful evening. And again, thank you so very much. I enjoyed this very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.